Okay. All set. Great. We are live. We are live. Zoom room is live. Facebook is live. I think, yes, Facebook is live. So interestingly, I've been talking a lot about this concept of safety. I've been talking a lot about this concept of safety, both obviously in my groups and the programs I run, but also a little bit more on social media and just sort of expanding on this idea of safety. And you guys are really, really into it and have a lot of questions about it. What do I mean safety? Why does it matter? Why are we talking about it? What are we, and so today's healthy conversation, I'm going to elaborate a little bit more than the tidbits I've been putting out there on social media about what I mean by safety, why I'm using that word, because if I'm honest, there's an interesting or strange connotation with that word safety, and I have considered thinking of another word to use, but I can't quite find the word that encompasses what I truly mean by it. And so I'm continuing to use the word safety unless or until I can find another word that truly conveys what I mean. Similar to in my book, when I used the word healthy obsession, I think I mentioned, some of you know this, but in the book, when I used the word healthy obsession, I really wanted to come up with a different word that conveyed the importance of the focus on healthy behaviors to overcome all of the biological mechanisms that are pushing us to, not be healthy, right? And I tried to come up with a different word other than obsession, and truly, that word was the word that fit. And as you know, the definition, my definition of healthy obsession is the sustained preoccupation of the planning and execution of target behaviors used to reach a healthy goal. So that word, best encompassed what I was trying to convey. In the same way, to me, this word safety encompasses what I am trying to convey in the, in the theory or in the model of it. So let me back up and say a little bit more about what I mean. So conventional ways of losing weight historically have all focused on external inputs, right? So the food that we eat and the movement, right? This whole, the calories in, calories out, which, by the way, I'll try not to get off topic, but calories in, calories out still does matter. There's been a lot of chatter and a lot of noise in the industry that talk about, well, that's not the whole story. And as I mentioned last week, it's not the entire story, but it matters. That piece of the story still matters, if not most, a considerable amount. So I won't get off track, but because the calories in, calories out story is there, a lot of the focus has been on the external inputs, the food you're eating and the movement that we do. And again, as I go into this, I'm not discounting that is a large piece of the story. And in fact, everything that I'm about to say impacts the decisions we make about those external inputs. So what I'm about to talk about when it pertains to safety is because when we address it on the level that I want to address it at, it helps give different signals for those external inputs, the amount of food and the amount of activity. Okay, so historical ways of focusing on weight loss have focused solely on those external inputs. Now, what we know about the way the beautiful body works, and you all know I am a sucker for research, and I love understanding the brain, and I love understanding the body, and I love understanding this mechanism, right? You all know how much I love those things. And when we start to understand the way that the brain and body works, one of the things that comes quickly to the surface, that rises quickly to the surface, is this concept that the brain is always first and foremost looking out for our survival, right? That is at the very basic level. That's the brain's job, is to make sure that it's scanning the environment for our survival. That's the oldest parts of our brain. And let me just say, again, I'll try not to get sidetracked on this conversation, but let me just say that it is only a very small snippet of time that we have lived in our, quote, modern industrialized environment, where a small period of time where we were farmers, and even a smaller period of time where we had grocery stores, right? So in a grand scheme of us as a species, and depending on whether you believe in sort of creation or evolution, it's been over thousands of years that we have been as humans on this planet. And in that thousands of years, it's only been a couple hundred years where we were not hunter-gatherers, and then even less amount of time where we went to a grocery store to get all our food, right? So we're talking a very, very small amount of time in the grand scheme of things. We think it's long, right? Because, we're living in this, and it's like, my whole life I've had access to a grocery store. Yes, but when you look at it from an evolutionary or a biological perspective, like 0.05%, something like that, of the amount of time where we as humans have lived like this, eaten this way, eaten this type of food. And why that matters is because all of our biological mechanisms that drive us to eat, and drive us to eat certain types of food and certain amounts of food, and the biological mechanisms that interpret eating behavior are from thousands of years ago. Because us living right now, we're the newbies. We're like the hypothesis in a scientific research study, right? We don't know anything about ourselves right now. It seems like we know so much, right? But think about the modern industrialized era. Think about technology and how long technology has been around for a minuscule moment, and we think we know everything, right? But in truth, we are still relying on these very, very primitive parts of the brain that run the entire show. Now, what am I talking about here? Your body and brain regulates every system in your body. It regulates your body temperature within like a degree or two. Think about that. Think about your body temperature and how the body regulates your body temperature on its own. It pumps air through your lungs. It pumps the blood through all of your organs. Your body does all of this with your pH level in your body, your acidity versus alkaline level in your body. Your pH level is within a minuscule amount that it changes. And the body regulates that all on your own without you having any conscious awareness of how that works. Now, let me tell you this. It regulates your adiposity and your weight in the same way. Right? It's done this for thousands of years on its own, before cavemen had language, before, we were able to walk to a grocery store, before we were able to keep meat cold, before we were able to do any of these things. Our body regulated its adiposity and its weight so that we could survive all on its own. We were not thinking about calories. We were not thinking about what we wanted to have for dinner. There was no grocery store to go buy things. Your body did this all on its own. It's still doing that. That's what I need you to understand. It's still doing that. The problem that we're facing right now in our modern day era is that our evolution has not caught up. It has not biologically changed. The evolution of us as a species has not, the evolution of us as a species has vastly fast forwarded to what's currently happening in our brain system, right? So we are way too far ahead of the system. We don't need the body to be interpreting our environment as a threat anymore. We don't need the brain to scan the environment for safety to keep us alive anymore, right? in most cases. Yes, we still want it when we're walking down a dark alley and if there's somebody hiding behind a dumpster. Yes, we'd still like to keep that, scanning the environment for danger. But the amount that the brain scans the environment for danger every day is getting confused with inputs like your job that's stressful, your marriage that's stressful, your friendships that are stressful, your family system that is stressful, your bills that are stressful, Ukraine that is stressful, the political environment that is stressful, COVID that is stressful. The brain is getting these cues that is signaling the same response in the body that the body needed thousands of years ago to protect you from death. But this is not imminent death. It's getting confused. The brain's biological system has not caught up to where we are from an evolutionary standpoint, if that makes sense. So when I talk about safety, what I'm talking about is the fact that the mechanisms in the subconscious, unconscious, non-conscious, you hear all these different ways to describe it, doesn't matter, subconscious parts of the brain, the reptilian part of the brain and your limbic system, which are the oldest parts of the brain, which were developed first thousands of years ago before we ever had a neocortex, right? Those parts of the brain were designed to scan for danger all the time. And when it interpreted a threat, it was designed to mobilize all of the parts in the body to respond to that threat to keep us alive. All the parts in the body, right? So our musculoskeletal system, our digestive system, our endocrine system, our, brain center regions, right? All of that stuff went to mobilizing all of the resources that would go to those systems were reallocated to deal with the stress. That was a good system for us at the time, so that we could make sure we had energy to fight when we needed to, or flee when we needed to, or freeze when we needed to, whatever it is, right? We all can kind of understand that, but how does it play into us now? When our body, I keep saying body, I think I want to say brain. It's interesting because the brain-body connection. Okay, I'm not going to go down another rabbit hole. I'm going to stay focused. When the brain gets a signal that there is some type of threat, it is still allocating those resources in the same way. It is still affecting our inflammatory system, our nervous system, our digestive system, our immune system, right? All of that stuff. When the brain is getting the signal of a threat. So when I say safety, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, is your brain interpreting some signal as a threat that would require it to mobilize resources, reallocate resources to deal with the threat, okay? That's what I'm talking about when I say safety. Now, what kinds of things send a signal to the brain to reallocate systems to deal with the threat? What are those things in our daily lives? Like I said, your stressful relationship, your relationship with money, your past history and trauma, traffic that upsets you, the way you interpret the world around you and whether or not you have control over it and how much you interpret that as frustrating, right? Your relationships with your friends, your relationship with your boss, death, divorce, perceived trauma, actual trauma, PTSD. Sound familiar to anyone, everyone, right? I mean, our environment that we currently live in are constantly sending up these signals they're sending up these distress flares, right? And depending on a few factors, these distress flares can send signals to the body to activate the resources for safety. Now, what are the resources that they activate? Many, many of them, but they will create leptin resistance, insulin resistance, a lower inflammatory response, a higher inflammatory response, a lower immune response, because all of the resources are being diverted into other areas to deal with this threat. And so it takes resources from your immune system. It takes resources from your insulin sensitivity. It takes resources, right, from other places to deal with the threat. Another thing that happens is that when the body feels threatened, it says, well, wait a second, I need to survive. What is the basic thing I need to survive? Well, when we were back in hunter-gatherer days, it was the right amount of adiposity. It was the right amount of weight on our bodies so that we could survive when it was cold or when we didn't have enough food. So one of the things that it regulates automatically is your adiposity. So it starts to use its non-conscious abilities to regulate your adiposity when it feels threatened or a signal of distress. This is hours long of conversation. I'm trying to distill it down into kind of a bite-sized chunk for you all today. So when I talk about things like, is the body getting signals of a lack of safety, which will then cause it to mobilize resources to deal with that lack of safety, and it perhaps will have an impact on your ability to lose weight. What I'm talking about are all of these factors that happen largely outside of our conscious awareness, but here's how it impacts us. Okay, here's how like rubber meets the road, right? Many of these, there are, in my view, and I will just say the working hypothesis that I'm working with and diving deep into the research and talking to people about research, and I would love to ultimately sort of be able to prove this with research, but those of you who know me well know that there's 50% of my brain wants to prove it with research, and 50% of my brain says, I don't care about the research because if you feel better, then that's all I need from you, right? So my hypothesis is there are functions in the body that when it gets a distress signal, this is not a hypothesis, this is proved by research, but there are functions in the body that when you get a distress signal from any area, that it will kick up your cues to eat a certain amount of food and a certain type of food, okay? So it will kick up your ghrelin, okay? The ghrelin hormone is the thing that makes you feel hungry. It will lower your leptin. Leptin helps with satiety, tells you you've had enough food, right? So it will do things, the body out of your conscious awareness will do things to make you feel hungrier, and it will turn down your response to satiety, so you're going to eat more. It will also make you feel more tired so that you exercise less, right, to hold on to some of those calories, right? These are all the things, these are all the non-conscious things in the body that can be going on when in reaction to a stressor that will make you eat more, okay? So part of what the body does to maintain that adiposity is to make you eat more, make you consume more, make you feel hungrier, make you feel less full. And the types of calories that it's looking for is, as you can imagine, hyperpalatable food. In our modern food environment, it equates to processed food and hyperpalatable food. That's the type of food it's looking for, and it will make you eat more of it. Okay, so that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin that I'm really interested in, and that this is where my hypothesis comes in, is that the other side of the coin are the non-conscious biological mechanisms that the body can regulate on its own that will resist essentially the burning of calories so that you don't burn the energy, so that you don't lose the weight, if that makes sense. So if you want to think about the way that the body could regulate your weight without your conscious awareness, right? How could the body do that without your conscious awareness? It could trigger you to eat more so that you consume more energy, and it could find a way to burn less energy. So that way you're in a calorie surplus, right? You're in an energy surplus, and the body could do this all on its own without your conscious awareness. Now, the eat more piece, we can make an argument that there are ways to mitigate that and manage that eat more piece, right? Becoming more aware, becoming an intentional eater, that kind of stuff, right? We could mitigate the eat more piece because that we have some control over. Even when the body's sending us signals to do it, we have some control over. But what about the piece where the body is on its own, burning fewer calories, fuel, expending less energy so as to keep your weight at a certain place, right? We know some of these happen. We know that the body regulates what's called your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. You're twitching, kind of moving around, right? Your body will stop doing that so as to conserve energy. We know that it can, to some extent, regulate your metabolic functioning, meaning it can kind of it can slow down your rate of burn, right? There's also been some studies to show that even people who exercise drastically, the body has a way to regulate how much calories it burns throughout the day. So even somebody who's, run for 3 hours, and you would go, wow, 3 hours, technically they burn this many calories, right? Well, actually, when we look at it, there's been some randomized control studies on this, that the body has a way of regulating its expenditure as well. So when we start putting these things together and we say, well, wait a second, if the body unconsciously, non-consciously has the way to regulate our adiposity outside of our entirety of control, meaning, yes, we can mitigate what goes in, but what if it's mitigating what goes out outside of our control? Why would it do that? Well, in reaction to stress, if it thinks that it needs to keep you safe, will it turn down the energy expenditure without your conscious awareness? Like, there isn't anything actively we can do to say to the body, hey, turn up that calorie burn. I'd really like to lose some weight here. Can you turn up that calorie burn for me, right? If the body is getting the signal that it is under distress and needs to hold on to the weight, can the body do that outside our conscious control? So my working hypothesis is, and there's a lot of good research to support many aspects of this hypothesis. But the one piece that I'm still digging into and understanding more is, what are the parts of the body that can control our energy expenditure, meaning our calorie burn, outside of our control? Okay, so if we take that tiny piece out, then we say, all right, Eliza, well, what do we do about this, right? For me, that leads me to the other area of research, which I am, fascinated with, which is how we regulate our nervous system to give the body consistent signals of safety. First of all, recognize when we're getting those signals of a lack of safety, and how do we give the body the signals of safety throughout the day, more often throughout the day, to create a higher baseline level of functioning where we're able to regulate our nervous system better. And in my working hypothesis, if we're able to better regulate our nervous system better throughout the day, then what happens? The body stops getting this signal that it needs to protect us by keeping adiposity, and allows us to not only be triggered into eating more, right? Also not be triggered into eating those hyperpalatable and processed foods, right? Because it's not stressed, because it's not getting the message of a lack of safety. The body is functioning under a more stable environment on a regular basis, right? So how does this all translate into kind of day-to-day activity? If you've worked with me for any period of time, you hear me talk a lot about safety. Safety first, in my opinion, and I know that's such a cliche sort of statement, but in all the work that I do, it's about, can we regulate this nervous system first and foremost? Can we create this, can we create this baseline level of a more functioning system first, given the environment that we're all in now? So remember, I go back to this, like, it's not that we didn't have stressors hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. I mean, in some respects, we had true safety stressors, being eaten by things and, dying from poisonous berries that we weren't supposed to eat. Like, that was a stressor, right? But this chronic activation of that stress in the number of angles that it's hitting every day, right? With the amount of inputs, I think we could argue that while the stress is less acute, it is considerably more chronic, right? It's everywhere all the time. All you have to do is pick up your smartphone and Google News and you're like, stress everywhere, right? And it's all the time. It is just an onslaught of it. So my hypothesis is we need systems, and I mean we as an entire human race, right? Whether you're at a healthy weight or not, I believe that as a human race, we have to start implementing nervous system regulation tools on a regular basis just to be able to have a baseline level of functioning that is healthy for everybody, to be able to deal with the onslaught, the oncoming inputs that we get every day, all the time. We need to have a nervous system that is better regulated in general, all of us, okay? You layer on top of that people who struggle with weight and obesity, that they have what I call a loaded gun, right? There's a propensity for lower impulse control. There's a propensity for increased sort of addiction responses, or even let's not get into the topic of food addiction, but I think you all know what I mean, but like an increased susceptibility to difficulty with response to processed foods. They have, their sort of bodies are primed for the modern food environment and an overconsumption of processed foods, right? You add that all together with a nervous system that is not well regulated, and also with a propensity for the body to make us want to eat more and want to eat the wrong foods, and you've got the perfect storm, right? So my priority number one is to get people to activate themselves into a better baseline level of functioning every day. There are many things we can do to regulate our nervous system every day, and that becomes priority number one. And sometimes I find that when we have priority number one pretty well dialed in, that it takes care of a lot of the extraneous eating issues kind of on its own, right? Because the body's not looking for that binge to make them feel better. The body's not looking for that processed food to make them feel better, right? So we kind of mitigate that a little bit on its own. Then once we have a regulated nervous system, once we have figured out the ways to activate the body into a stronger distress tolerance, better emotion regulation skills, better coping skills, better able to get those inputs of stress and deal with them better, then we can start looking at, excuse me, how do I pick my external inputs like food and movement that help facilitate this nervous system that feels better, that help facilitate this picture of health and longevity that feels better. We don't do that first. We do that second, after we've regulated the nervous system, because one of the biggest reasons we do this, hang on. Man, I'm going long today. I swear I'll wrap it up. One of the biggest reasons we pick the inputs, food and movement, second, is because dieting, chronic dieting, is a stress trigger, right? Chronic dieting feels stressful, and for many people, historically, has been stressful for the body because, and I won't go down this rabbit hole, we create too big of a calorie deficit that sends signals to the body that it's not sure where food is coming from, that activates all the distress signals, and the body goes, whoa, what's going on here? So if we jump to the inputs first, food and movement, then we run the risk of inadvertently activating those distress signals. So again, my working hypothesis here is that when we regulate the body's nervous system first, when we do things, and I won't go into all of them today, but we do things like visualization or meditation or grounding or time in nature or movement for the sake of moving the body, or becoming aware of our vibration and understanding when we, are upstream or downstream, or tapping, or meditation techniques, or there's all these things that we can do to help regulate the nervous system that are, relatively free and easy, if I'm honest. When we do those things regularly and get the body to a place of safety, or even be able to recognize when I'm dysregulated so that I can bring myself back into a more regulated state. Now I can make a decision about my inputs that will help keep me in the direction of where I want to go versus signaling the distress response. Okay, that was a very long-winded explanation of safety. Yes, Jennifer, I think you are a perfect candidate for that hypothesis. That was a very long-winded explanation of safety and why I think it's so important. And, the truth is there are, as you know, it's my job to research these things. And I am always doing a lot of research on the various biological mechanisms that are involved in regulating our weight and how we choose food and why we choose food and all of those things, right? That's my job. And then my passion is giving the information to you all. But I think one of the if I'm going to wrap this all up and say, I think the big piece that I've noticed that is missing is that if we jumped to the external environments first, we're missing the not just opportunity, but the imperative to make sure that our nervous system is ready for a change in the input. We want to make sure that the nervous system is ready for us to go out then and choose foods from an empowering place, choose our diet from a place of peace and ease and joy and alignment where we can go, yeah, I say no to the donut because I feel so good when my body feels better, rather than I say no to the donut because I can't have it. And why does everybody else get to have it? And man, I really need it because I need to feel better. Like that's a different nervous system activation than it is when you have your food decisions coming from a place of true alignment and safety, okay? So for those of you that have been following along on me talking a lot about safety, I hope this video, it was longer than I thought it would be, sorry. I hope this video was helpful when it comes to explaining that a little bit more, both in the, I'm checking the comments here, both in the explanation for why safety is so important for the body, how we get triggered into a lack of safety, what happens when we get triggered into a lack of safety, both from a non-conscious food intake perspective, but also possibly a calorie expenditure perspective. I say possibly because I'm still needing to find that exact mechanism where it connects, but I'm pretty sure it's there. So yes, I hope this was helpful today. Let me know if you guys have any follow-up questions on that, or if I can go into things even a bit more. There's a ton more to explain. And of course, I do a lot of that in my coaching and the SHIFT program and all of that kind of stuff. But hopefully that was helpful for you all today. I will see you next week.